Desmond Cole was 40 years old, the founder of a 7-year-old infrastructure technology company that had spent the last 18 months going through the hardest stretch of its existence. He ran 5 miles every morning on the same route in the same shoes before anyone else at the company arrived. He had run through 2 failed contracts, a quarter with no revenue, and 14 months of rebuilding something he had refused to believe was finished. He ran through all of it. On a Friday evening in late October, while Desmond was downtown at the closing dinner for a $600 million contract his company had just been awarded, his wife Imani was at her sister's home telling the people in their lives that his company was basically done and that she was tired of carrying a man who had peaked. She had been saying these things since approximately 8:30 that evening, the contract signed at 9:47. What she had not known, what none of the people in that room had known, was that Desmond had been working on the Northern Corridor Transit Technology Services Agreement for 8 months under a strict non-disclosure agreement that had prevented him from telling anyone anything. Not the terms, not the timeline, not even the name of the authority, not Imani. She had decided the story was over at the exact hour he was finishing the work. She had no idea what she was about to find out. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:14 every morning. Desmond was already awake. He had been a runner since his early 20s, not competitively, not for weight, but because motion was how he thought. 5 miles, same route through the neighborhood and along the waterfront and back, same pace, same shoes until they wore out. His team had learned to recognize when he came into the office having run versus having driven, the difference in his energy, in the precision of what he said in the first meeting of the day. Running was where the problems got solved. Everything else was the execution. Desmond Cole had started Veritas Systems Group at 33 with a contract, a team of 4, and a specific theory that the infrastructure sector was being held back by software built for the wrong problems. He spent 3 years proving the theory on smaller contracts and 4 years scaling what the proof had built. By the time he was 38, Veritas had 41 employees and a reputation in 2 sectors. Then they lost the Meridian Port contract, regulatory changes, nothing he could have prevented, but a $40 million loss from the revenue forecast. 8 months later, the Eastfield municipal contract was canceled when the city council changed composition and froze all new technology spending. Another $28 million gone. He had a company built around 2 contracts that no longer existed and 14 months to figure out what came next. He did not lay off anyone. He cut his own salary first, then restructured, then rebuilt the pipeline. It was the hardest thing he had built. He ran through all of it. He didn't tell Imani everything, not because he was hiding it, because she had stopped asking. The silences between them had been growing for over a year, and somewhere in those silences she had drawn her own conclusions and stopped leaving room for a different answer. He hadn't known how final her conclusions had become. 8 months before the Friday evening, he had been sent a non-disclosure agreement by the procurement office of the Northern Corridor Transit Authority. He had signed it on a Tuesday morning at 5:30 before he ran, because he didn't want anything to be in the way of the run. The NDA covered all aspects of the proposal process: scope, timeline, terms, evaluation criteria, everything. He could say nothing to anyone outside the negotiation. He had told Imani that evening there was a major municipal proposal in progress, could be significant. Couldn't say more. She had looked at him for a moment and said, "Those things never go anywhere," and reached for the remote. He had remembered that. The restaurant where the closing dinner was held was on the 14th floor of a building 2 blocks from the transit authority's offices. Glass walls, the city spread out below, the kind of light that makes everything look like it has already been decided correctly. There were 8 people at the table: Desmond, his, 3 members of the legal team, and the transit authority's procurement director and 2 of her colleagues. They had been working toward this moment for 8 months. The contract had been formally awarded 3 days earlier. The closing dinner was the signing of the final executed agreement. At 9:47, Desmond uncapped his pen and signed his name on the signature page of the Northern Corridor Transit Technology Services Agreement. 10 years, $600 million. The largest contract in Veritas Systems Group's history by a factor that restructured the entire company in the same stroke. He set the pen down. The procurement director shook his hand. His a woman named Petra, who had been with him since year 2 and had lived through every hard month, looked at him across the table and said nothing. She didn't need to. He nodded once. She nodded back. He drove home at 11. The house was dark. Imani's car was not in the garage. He was not surprised. She often stayed at her sister's on Friday evenings. He went inside and set his keys on the counter and stood in the kitchen for a moment, still, with the specific quality of stillness that arrives after something large and long worked for finally lands. His phone buzzed on the counter. He looked at it. A text from his Aunt Octavia. "Call me before you talk to Imani." He stood there for a moment. He called her. 3 miles across the city. That same evening the lights had been warm and low in Renata's dining room. Wine had been poured twice. There were 8 people at that table, too. Imani, her sister Renata, and Renata's husband Gerald. 2 couples they had known for years. A woman named Faye, who was Imani's closest friend. The kind of gathering where the guard comes down because the room feels safe. Imani had been drinking steadily since 7. It had started with a question, probably innocent, probably just filling conversational space. "How is Desmond? How is the company?" And Imani had answered. Octavia told him what she had heard secondhand from Gerald, who had called her the following morning, unsettled by what had happened. That Imani had told the table the company was basically finished, that she had been watching it for 18 months, and there was nothing left to watch. That she had said she was tired of being the stable one, that she was tired of carrying the weight of someone who had peaked, that she had used that word specifically, peaked, that she had spoken about him with the finality of someone describing a patient who had already been discharged. She said she was making decisions, Octavia said. She said it like the decisions were already made. Desmond stood in his kitchen with his phone pressed to his ear. He looked at the counter. He looked at his keys where he had set them. He looked at the window above the sink and the dark outside it. He had signed the contract 47 minutes earlier. "All right," he said. "Desmond, I hear you," he said. "Thank you for calling me." He set the phone down on the counter. He did not call Imani. He did not drive to her sister's house. He stood in the kitchen for a few minutes more. He thought about what the procurement director had said when she shook his hand. This is the kind of work that lasts. He thought about 5 miles in the dark every morning for 14 months, while the company was being rebuilt into exactly the thing that had just signed that contract. He thought about the word peaked. Then he went upstairs. He had to run in the morning. 4 years before that Friday, Desmond had spent 7 consecutive weekends building the deck behind their house. Imani had wanted it for 3 years, a specific vision, a specific set of materials, a specific configuration that the contractors who had quoted it had all priced beyond what she wanted to spend. He had told her he would build it himself. She had told him he didn't have to. He had told her he knew, and he had started the following Saturday. He had done it in sequence, the way he did everything. Foundation before framing, framing before decking, decking before the railing. He had measured each piece on the ground before it went up. He had not rushed a single joint. Imani had brought him coffee in the mornings and watched him work and told him, on the 6th weekend, that it was the best thing anyone had ever built for her. He had believed her. He had noticed the change the following year. Not a single thing, but a texture. The way a job site changes when something in the substructure shifts and hasn't broken yet, but will. She came home from the financial advisory appointment in January, talking about Marcus Birch's analysis of their investment allocation with a warmth in how she said his name that was 2 degrees warmer than the topic warranted. He had noted it. He had said nothing about it. He had filed it away the way he filed things, without announcement, without deciding yet what it meant. The following spring he had found a credit inquiry notification from a bank he didn't recognize. He had looked at it and looked away. He had told himself it was an error, a system flag, something administrative. He had extended the benefit of the doubt because that was what he did when the evidence wasn't complete. The year after that, the company hit its hard stretch, and his attention had narrowed to the work. And the texture of the house had shifted further, and he had told himself they would find each other again on the other side of the rebuilding. He had not understood that she had already decided there was no other side, that while he was rebuilding, she had been planning her exit timed to the moment she believed the rebuilding would fail. That was what she hadn't understood. The rebuilding hadn't failed. He called his attorney, Walter Ashby, that Saturday morning at 7:02, after his run, before he did anything else. Walter was the kind of attorney who picked up before the second ring and asked one question before he gave any advice. What do you want the outcome to be? He had represented Desmond on the Veritas corporate matters for 4 years. He had a quiet, organized mind that processed information like a well-run site, everything placed in order, nothing moved until the thing before it was confirmed. Desmond told him everything: the dinner, what Octavia had reported, the contract that had signed the night before, the credit inquiry he had filed away. Walter listened without interrupting. "Don't talk to her until Monday," Walter said. "I want you to give me Saturday to make some calls, and I need you to contact Constance Ossie at the firm. She handles the financial forensics I'm thinking of." Constance Ossie was 63 years old, a retired forensic accountant who now consulted exclusively for law firms on financial irregularity matters. She was precise, unhurried, and thorough in the way that people are thorough when they've spent 30 years finding the number that was supposed to stay hidden. She had reviewed the financials of 14 companies in Desmond's sector over the previous 8 years. She came recommended because she didn't miss things. She did not miss things this time either. By the following Wednesday, she had the full picture. Desmond sat across from her and Walter at Walter's conference table on a Tuesday afternoon. Constance placed the documents in order. The first was a transfer record from the joint investment account. Beginning 17 months ago, transfers had been made on an irregular schedule, small enough to avoid automated alerts, consistent enough to accumulate. Total transferred over 17 months, $310,000. The destination account was a personal account in Imani's name alone, opened the previous January. The second document was a credit application filed in Desmond's name at a private lending institution in April, a home equity line of credit for $180. The application signature on file did not match Desmond's recorded signature on any prior document in the institution system. Desmond looked at that document. He looked at it the way he looked at engineering drawings when something in the load calculation didn't resolve, quietly, with the focused attention of a man identifying the exact place where the structure had been compromised. "There's one more thing," Constance said. She placed the third document. It was a financial advisory engagement agreement between Imani Cole and Marcus Birch, financial advisor, dated 11 months ago, standard language, but stapled to it was a bank record that showed a $12 transfer from the joint account to Marcus Birch's personal account 8 months ago, the same month the Veritas NDA had been signed. Desmond looked at the date of the transfer. He looked at the name. He thought about a warmth in how she had said a name, about a credit inquiry he had told himself was an error, about the specific filing away of things he had not been ready to look at directly. He stood up. He walked to Walter's window and looked at the street below. He stood there for a moment with both hands in his pockets. A bus passed. The city moved. He could see the whole shape of it. The 17 months of transfers, the unauthorized credit line, the advisor, the dinner party where she had described the end of something she had been planning to leave, while she drained it, the timing of all of it against the timeline of the NDA, the proposal, the contract that had signed at 9:47 on the same night she was telling people he had peaked. She had been planning the exit during the exact months he had been building the thing that made the exit pointless. "All right," he said. "Tell me what we do next." Constance refilled the water glasses on the table. She didn't say anything. She pulled the next document from the stack. He didn't move fast. That was the part she had not been able to account for. She had filed for divorce on the Monday after the dinner party. 3 days after the signing, the same morning, the Transit Authority issued its public press release announcing the contract award. His company's name was in the headline. She had read it. He knew because she had called at 8:47 that morning and he had let it ring. She had filed anyway. He understood the logic. She had already retained the attorney, already paid the retainer, already told the people in their lives the story she needed them to believe. Reversing course required a different kind of courage than she needed to start. She had not been able to find it. Walter filed the response to the divorce petition the following Thursday. The response noted, in attachment, the 3 documented financial irregularities, the 17 months of account transfers, the unauthorized credit application, and the advisory payment that had not been disclosed to the joint account holder. Total documented unauthorized exposure, $502,000. A civil fraud claim was filed separately the same day. Through the following 6 weeks, Imani's attorney reached out 3 times with proposed settlement terms. The terms were built on an assessment of the marital estate that did not account for the Veritas contract in full. Her attorney appeared to have accepted a valuation of the company that predated the contract award and was consequently off by a significant factor. Walter acknowledged each communication without substantive response. Imani called from a number Desmond didn't recognize on a Wednesday evening. He picked up. "You're not responding to anything," she said. Her voice was composed, practiced. "I'm not trying to make this a war." "I know," he said. "The terms are reasonable. You should look at them." "I've looked at them," he said. A pause. "And? The number for the company is wrong," he said. "Your attorney is working from the wrong number." Silence. "Come to the meeting," he said. "Walter will lay it out." He ended the call. Octavia was sitting at his kitchen table with her tea. She had been coming over on Wednesday evenings since this had started, not because he had asked, but because she was Octavia, and she understood when to show up without being asked. She had heard the call. She didn't say anything. He sat down across from her. "She still doesn't know what it's worth," he said. "No," Octavia said. He looked at the table. He thought about a word she had used, about the specific room where she had used it, about the 8 people who had heard it. "She will," he said. Octavia refilled his water glass and didn't say anything else. That was Octavia. She had always known when the situation had already been handled. Desmond arrived at Walter Ashby's office building at 8:21 in the morning. The settlement meeting was scheduled for 10. The conference room was on the 19th floor, neutral walls, the kind of table that communicated proceedings rather than conversations. The city was visible through the east window, clear morning, the kind of light that makes things look precisely as they are. He could see, if he looked south, the elevated rail line that ran through the transit corridor his software would be operating. He sat with his back to the window. Walter arrived at 8:40. Constance at 9:05. She placed her folders with the same unhurried precision she brought to every document review. The room got very quiet. Imani arrived at 9:58 with her attorney, a woman named Petra. No, her attorney was named Hallett. Compact, prepared, a woman who had read her client's version of the financial picture and found it coherent. Imani came in with the measured confidence of someone who had a number in mind and a structure around it. She sat down. She looked at Desmond once, briefly, and then at the table. Hallett opened her portfolio. Walter spoke first. "Before we discuss any settlement terms, I need to establish the current valuation of the primary marital asset, Veritas Systems Group, as it stands following the Northern Corridor Transit Technology Services Agreement executed October 24th. He placed the contract summary on the table, not the full contract, the summary page, with the term and the value. Hallett read it. She turned to the second page. She read that. She put it down with the particular neutrality of an attorney receiving information that restructures the conversation she had prepared for. Imani had seen the number over Hallett's shoulder. The expression that moved across her face was not a simple thing. It was the expression of a person whose calculation has just been revised in a direction that invalidates the premises. Not just the numbers, but the story she had built the numbers on. The peaked man, the finished company, the woman carrying the weight alone. 10 years, Walter said, for the record. $600 million. Executed and in force. He let it sit. Constance placed the second document set. Walter walked through the financial irregularity findings, the 17 months of transfers, the unauthorized credit line, the advisory payment. His voice was even and factual, the same temperature from the first word to the last. Total documented exposure, $502,000. Civil fraud filing. Attached. The signature comparison on the credit application. Attached. Hallett was reading. She had stopped projecting the confidence of someone who had prepared for the room she expected. Imani was looking at the table. Desmond stood. He buttoned his jacket. He shook Walter's hand. He shook Constance's hand. He walked toward the door. He stopped. He turned back. He looked at Imani directly, the way he had looked at the engineering drawings, the plans, the documents, with the steady, complete attention of a man who reads what is actually in front of him. "You told them I had peaked," he said, quietly. "The contract signed at 9:47 that same evening. I wanted the exact timing said out loud at least once." He walked out without looking back. It did not happen all at once. The civil fraud matter moved through the system over the following 7 months. The $502 was accounted for in the final asset division, adjusted, documented, applied. The unauthorized credit line was resolved under terms that included full repayment. Marcus Birch's professional standing was subject to a separate review by his licensing board, initiated on a complaint Constance filed as part of the fraud proceeding. The settlement, when it came, reflected the Veritas contract at its actual value. Imani's share of the marital estate was calculated against what actually existed, which was substantially different from what she had described at her sister's dinner table. On a Friday evening in October, she was not left with nothing. She was left with exactly what the law provided, and with a story she had told 8 people that 8 people now understood differently. Desmond went back to work. The Northern Corridor Transit Project entered its implementation phase in January. Veritas Systems Group grew from 41 employees to 93 in 14 months. His name was on the contract, on the implementation plan, on the press coverage that ran in 3 industry publications. Petra, his CO, ran the day-to-day operations with the calm efficiency of someone who had lived through the hard stretch and understood what the other side was worth. He ran 5 miles every morning, same route, same shoes until they wore through. He ran past the elevated transit line now, on the southern stretch of the route, the line that his software would run. He had started doing it on purpose, not out of pride, but because it was useful to look at the thing you built and understand how it fit into the larger structure around it. He answered every call the same day. He kept every timeline he committed to. He gave accurate estimates, and he hit them. He measured twice. He cut once. On a morning in early December, Desmond Cole ran his 5 miles in the cold, in the dark that comes before the city fully wakes. He ran past the row houses on Alderton, past the waterfront path where the light came in flat off the water, past the construction on the South Corridor, a new station, his software already contracted to run it, the steel frame going up in the winter light. He stopped at the corner where he always stopped to check his pace. The city was quiet at this hour. His breath showed in the cold. Below the elevated line, the first train of the morning moved through without stopping. A long, smooth motion, everything working the way it was supposed to work. He watched it go. He thought about 14 months of running through something he refused to believe was finished. About a word that had been used to describe him in a warm room across the city on the same night he had been signing his name on something that would run for 10 years. About what it felt like to know both of those things were true at the same hour, in the same city, under the same sky. He adjusted his pace and kept running. There was a lot of work left. There always was. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.